My name's Peter Hall, fruit and hop grower here in Marden. You're watching probably today's one of the 2 days we're picking our organic hop crop. We've been growing organic hops now since 1989. Prior to that, the family's been growing conventional hops for over 100 years here. The organic hop crop is picked and pressed up here on the farm and is then sold to the Witchwood Brewery over in Oxfordshire, where they make it into their own organic beer, Circle Master, and they also brew all the Dutch original ales under licence there. This year looks as if it's actually going to be a remarkably fine crop, despite enormous potential disease pressures. All the hops in the hedge have got terrible downy mildew, but fortunately Trevor, our main man, has managed to keep all the disease out of the hops by putting a little spray on here and there at the right moment.
The tractor's driven into the far end of the picking shed. Chains are then hooked onto the bar at the back of the draw sheet in the bottom of the trailer. The tractor draws forward and the hops are laid on the ground gently. You then have a team of hookers on who sort out, pick the top bine off the lump, pass it over to another one of the team who will then twist the bine onto the hook, ensuring that the long end of the bine is over the top, so the weight of the bine holds the bine onto the hook. The machine works far better if you get a nice even flow. Sometimes they miss hooks, but if you've got a bine on every hook, the machine works far better. As they're pulled up into the air, the bines untwist themselves, separate themselves, and they're then lowered into the main rotor banks, where rotating drums with sprung wire fingers on them pick off hops, laterals, leaves, and they drop onto a slow moving belt underneath. It is amazing that the fingers that are sprung steel can flick the hops off so effectively without smashing them to pieces. The speed of the rotor banks is very important to ensure the hops are just flicked off and not smashed up or parallel. Once the bines have been through the rotor banks, they pass by a saw which cuts them off from the hooks, and they're dropped down into a chopper. This is a very heavy knife driven by a flywheel which will chop the bines into pieces about 1 inch long, and they're then blown out onto a waste bine lump at the back of the building. Hops, laterals and leaves are carried out of the area under the rotor banks onto a roller bed, where the hops and the leaves fall through the rollers onto a belt underneath, and the bine goes through the lateral picker. The lateral picker picks the hops off any of the laterals that are remaining. They also drop through onto a belt below the lateral picker. This is like a giant compost heap. All the green waste is chopped up and blown onto the lump at the back. A year later, it's turned back very nearly to soil. It's very, very high in phosphates. If you want something good to put under your runner bean row, composted hop waste is absolutely fantastic. It also retains the moisture beautifully. It's very, very high in nutrients as a compost. Periodically, lumps of spanners and bits and pieces have been left on the hop picking machine. They find their way out to there. On one occasion, we actually threw one onto the roof of the house next door, which is about 50 yards away, and got a terrible telling off because they broke quite a number of tiles. These are strig belts. The hops come out, having been finally picked and cleaned, will come out onto these stipple belts which run at an angle. The hops being round roll, the leaves and strigs being lighter and not very round stay on the belts. And the hops will roll off onto the belt underneath, and the strig will be carried out and to the waste at the end. Final cleaning process is done by hand. Large pieces of bine or leaves that may have got missed in the cleaning process are picked out by hand. In the good old days, there used to be 6 women standing up here doing this job. Now we only have one. But then the hops used to be coming up that final belt 2 or 3 inches deep. There were different varieties in those days. The older varieties used to be very, very much bigger and lighter. Once the hops pass up this final belt, they drop through a chute and into a Hessian bag known as a poke. And when the pokes are full, they're removed from the machine. And the necks are tied with a piece of string ready for, set aside, ready for transportation down to the oast house at the end of the day. Decent bows, single bows that don't come undone but are easy to undo at the other end. There is nothing more infuriating than a bow coming undone with the poke halfway between the ground and the upper story of the oast house and having a shower of hops going all the way down to the ground. Likewise, when you've been working all day, there's nothing more irritating than having to undo a knot when you want to empty the poke. We would start harvesting at about starting the hop garden at 6:30 in the morning and start the machine at 7. By 9 o'clock in the morning, we'd have 100 pokes of hops ready for the oast house. Now we're lucky if we get 100 by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And a lot of these hop picking machines, when they were redundant in this country, were taken apart and exported to the Eastern Bloc, where they were still picking by hand. Once they're finished in the hop garden for the day, or finish the job entirely, the hop garden team will come down, and while the remaining hops are being put through the machine, will help to load the lorry. The pokes are stacked on, carefully ready for transportation down to the oast house. And a good old sweep up. With the dried hops being worth £15 a kilo, it's worth getting any that are on the floor and putting them through the machine so that they end up in a poke rather than on the waste lump. Again, it's loading business. If you go back to how it was done in the days where you'd got people working who did it year after year, you'd see them bend down, hold the top of the poke, the neck of the poke in one hand, bend over and pick the thing up onto their shoulders and then throw it into the air. These guys, despite the fact that they're young and huge and very strong, appear to be quite unable to do anything other than wrestle with them.
You want to go down with Hugo? We're going to get these off and get up the O's. Yeah, help yourself, yeah.
Fitter Nick Gaskin has been running the machine for the last couple of years. His father, John, had been hop picking in here for 52 years. He's now been banned from doing any work in there because he's had a heart bypass, and he's one of these guys who can't not get involved. The family have been hop picking here. They live in the village and they've been working here running the machinery for the last 50 years. The hops then taken down from the picking machine to the oast house at the other end of the farm. There never was an oast house at this end of the farm. This is where the hops have always been, but my great-grandfather bought the oast house at the other end of the village in 1920 something, and that's where we've dried our hops ever since.